In the meantime here, we do want to bring into the conversation legal analyst, former federal prosecutor, our friend Neama Rahmani, to help us make sense of some of these scenarios that are being floated and whether or not, like the president said, that there is a way to do this or that this is possible. And we're going to bring him in now. Neama, good to see you here. First up, you heard there President Trump in the Oval Office. He said this: they do say there's a way you could do it. Who's they?
I don't know who they is, Andrew, and I think the president is playing an early April Fool's Day joke on us because, like Madeline said, it's very difficult to amend the Constitution. It really would require the 22nd Amendment to be repealed. Now, there are a couple of potential ways. The first is the vice president loophole. So, theoretically, the president could run as vice president, with J.D. Vance being president. Vance would resign and immediately Trump would become president. The problem with that is there's the 12th Amendment, and the 12th Amendment says that no one who is ineligible to be president can run for vice president. So I think the Supreme Court would block that. I think the only possible legal loophole is this: the president runs for Congress. He is elected Speaker of the House. The Republicans run two different candidates in 4 years, and the president and vice president then resign after winning, and then Donald Trump would be third in line as Speaker of the House and becomes president again. That's the only theoretical way, but again, we're really talking about hypotheticals and fantasy here.
Yeah, I mean, those scenarios that you just laid out would presume or require the essentially dismissal of all political ambition with these people we're talking about, Speaker Johnson, Vice President Vance, to defer to Trump in all of those scenarios.
Absolutely. A lot of things would have to line up. J.D. Vance would have to win. Johnson would not have to run for Speaker, or Trump would have to run for Congress. So a lot of things would have to line up. It seems really far-fetched. But if we're talking about legal possibilities, that's really the only way. For Trump to ignore the 22nd Amendment, that's not going to be a possibility. Even the conservatives on the Supreme Court, I think, would block that. So there would have to be some other maneuvering. And like you said, whoever is elected president or president and vice president would have to be willing to step down and resign. And I can't really see that happening.
And Neama, I wanted to ask too, because the 22nd Amendment, which was codified and ratified in the wake of FDR's 4 terms in a row here, putting a term limit on the executive branch. You mentioned that you would have to repeal the 22nd Amendment if any of these theories had any meat to the bones of them. But wouldn't you also have to repeal it and then amend the Constitution again? Wouldn't it require those 2 steps?
Well, by repealing it, that's the restriction placed on the office of the presidency. You can't serve 2 terms. So once that restriction is limited, it's like prohibition, right? Prohibition, alcohol was illegal, and then once that amendment was repealed, then that prohibition no longer exists. So if there is no 22nd Amendment, then there is no restriction on anyone serving more than 2 terms, because that restriction is not in the original Constitution itself. So it's possible, it's unlikely. Again, 3/4 of the states to approve this. Getting this approved in 2/3 of both houses of Congress, that supermajority is just not going to happen. So there would have to be some end run or a way to circumvent the 22nd Amendment, because politically, I think it's a non-starter, Andrew. You'd really have to try to find some legal loophole here.
Well, Chuck Grassley there, the Republican from Iowa, when asked about this, said, read the Constitution. I shouldn't have to answer that. Read the Constitution. And so, you know, frankly, President Trump has been candid about the fact that they just got there. They're only 2 months in. 4 years is a long time in the scope of things in a presidential term here. And he was focused on that. He was somewhat forthcoming about kind of just the reality of that fact with time constraints on him there. So I thought that was really interesting how he's kind of politically navigating some of these questions, but he is still leaving the door open. And if this were all to come to pass, if we're talking about these theories, presumably Democrats would also take advantage of newly ratified amendments. And so I want to pose this question to our viewers, Neama, while we have you. And they can scan this QR code there in the upper right hand of your screen. And the question is this: would you support an amendment that allows U.S. presidents to serve more than 2 terms? And the counterfactual of that is, would you support the repeal of the 22nd Amendment? So please go to livenowfox.com/connect or get out your mobile phones, get out your camera there, take a picture of that QR code, and please vote. We want to hear from you, yes or no, and hopefully we can get a better picture of what the viewers think about this question here. But, I mean, President Trump, you heard there, that was Peter Ducey's question. Would you want to run against Barack Obama if Democrats tried this idea at hand here? This is a talker.
Absolutely, Andrew. And what a great question. And I think people that are watching, they would certainly be talking. We all would be talking about a Barack Obama versus Donald Trump presidential race. How fascinating would that be? Setting aside all the constitutional questions, if the 22nd Amendment were repealed, I think that would be one for the ages. 2 very experienced presidents with a loyal following. I think it would be the presidential race for the ages.
All right, Neama, you see there, we're getting some votes in. Looks like 100%. We don't entirely know yet how many of you have voted. You can see it fluctuate there. So we'll let our viewers know how many of you have weighed in on this question here. But Neama, do you think the talk will die down eventually?
I think it will. I mean, when it comes to the president, regardless of how you think of him, he is one to push the legal limits and the boundaries. So today it's obviously the 22nd Amendment and running for a 3rd term, but whether it's been birthright citizenship or deportations or defunding certain government agencies or federal judges. I mean, this is something that Donald Trump is willing to do. He's willing to push the envelope. I think there are certain things that are potential winners, but this is one I think that's going to be too much for him to overcome. The 22nd Amendment, the 12th Amendment, the Constitution is pretty clear on this one.
All right, Neama Rahmani, can't thank you enough. We'll definitely be speaking soon. Remember, Neama, these hearings are taking place before House and Senate committees just this week about some of these efforts to rein in the federal judiciary by some of these Republicans on the Hill. So maybe we can speak about that like we did last week. Neama, as always, thanks so much.